Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Now let's take you through East Africa Roundup. Kenya celebrated Madarak Day yesterday, and this day commemorates the day in 1963 that Kenya attained internal self-rule after being a British colony since 1920. Now joining us this morning to explore what exactly Madarak Day is about and the political implications it's had on Kenya's political landscape is Darren Bartlett, our East African correspondent. Good morning, Darren, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Hope you're well as well. Darren, let's get into the conversation this morning, talking about Madarak Day. First of all, I'd like to ask you, what is usually the celebration surrounding Madarak Day before we get into its, its implication on the political landscape? Is there usually a public holiday? How exactly is it observed in Kenya?
Now, Madarak Day is, yes, it's a public holiday in Kenya, and usually what it means is that the Kenyans attained self-rule and self-control of the public institutions in government. I'll give an example that there's a time that they had mayors who were whites, public officers who headed government institutions, ministries who were not Kenyans. Now, once they attained that control of public offices and running government by themselves, before independence, that became a landmark, and that was already a site license towards looking at achieving independence that eventually happened later on, months just after attaining the Madarak Day. So yes, Madarak Day is usually a public holiday in Kenya, very much observed, and it was really a mark and a milestone towards attaining independence as a nation.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you very much for giving us a background as to what exactly, it looks like in Kenya. But let's talk about the actual impact of this. How has Kenya's political landscape evolved since gaining its right to internal self-rule? So basically, would you say that there have been any changes, and what are the positive changes that you've seen, positive and negative, I would say?
When you look into East Africa, you will realize that it's possibly only Kenya that has had a peaceful transfer of power in terms of from one political party to another, and they have exercised this whole political system in the country. Now, when Kenya got independence, that was Jomo Kenyatta who was leading the country in Kenya, and when he passed on, Moi came, ruled for 20-something years. And then they got into Mwai Kibaki, who was from another party. Power transferred from Mwai Kibaki to Kenyatta, the son, Uhuru, who was from another party. And now you see Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto, who's also from another party. So it's one of the countries only in East Africa that has managed to transfer power from one political party to another. You cannot compare that with Tanzania, that has had one political party ever since they attained independence. Uganda has never had a peaceful transfer of power. It has always been guns out and in until we got President Museveni, who has also ruled for 36 years, and it's only one political party. So when you look at the politics of how Kenya has handled it in East Africa, you would say that is a plus, and that is what it means to be democratic. But also, too, you've had honest debates in Kenya, even when they have had issues to do with violence at some points that they have disagreed in terms of how elections have been conducted. They still tend to move forward. They have had debates and elections that are very closely contested compared to whenever you go in East Africa, where you find Kagame, who wins with 90-something%. President Museveni has also always won in 60s and 70s%. You go to Tanzania, where you cannot contest an election. In fact, whoever wins has won. That is it. You cannot contest the process of an election of how it has happened. Now, when you look at that kind of process, they have done a fantastic job. And when you look at also in terms of the economy of the country, how people of Kenya have come together and how governments have run the economy of Kenya. Kenya comes off as the 6th biggest economy in Africa. And that has been done deliberately through political parties. And I like the fact that they forget about what political parties are when it comes to parliament and when they are debating issues of the country. For example, the housing bill, the financial inclusion that they are discussing till today, that even if the idea of rejecting someone's manifesto was there in the beginning in terms of elections, they still take away the political feel and debate the actual issues that actually impact on the people of Kenya. Now, when you look at the hustle fund that was approved and launched yesterday, it has already had an impact, despite the fact that it comes from another political party, and that it has not yet been launched officially. But yesterday, by the time it was launched, there are already 5 million farmers who have signed up for seeds and so on and so forth. So politically, you may say that Kenya is probably the most mature country in terms of politics in East Africa.
Okay, now we've talked about the political angle. Let's also talk about the economic aspect very quickly as possible. There are people who have, I've seen a number of reactions to Madaraka Day. Of course, some celebrating William Ruto as the one who was the stone that the builders rejected at last Madaraka is now running the show in this Madaraka. But there's also complaints. In fact, I'm going to read a particular tweet here. And now this one says, leaders will ask you to have a happy Madaraka Day with an empty stomach and then pass the finance bill in the next week. There's also another one that says, what does Madaraka Day even mean when IMF and World Bank are the ones ruling your country? Self-governance, where? So let's talk about, the economic situation. We know of the challenges that the Kenyan government has faced. We've seen protests that have been taken to the streets due to increased cost of living. Did this in any way affect how people, the mood and the feel in Kenya when it came to conversations about Madaraka?
No, the timing of also celebrating Madaraka this year has been a little bit tricky, despite them going through a political election and contestation and riots that have been happening, but also in a situation where the Ukraine and Russian war has affected Kenya in terms of how they have been trading. They have the highest inflation so far in history at the moment. But that all is caused mostly by external factors and also some uncontrollable things. I like to call them the hand of God things, like climate change, where they cannot really do much about that. So there are some external factors, and you cannot push them away. But we need to acknowledge the fact that the economy of Kenya has grown at least by 20% compared to 20 years ago. Now, that kind of increase of an economy where they are running a budget of about $60 billion US, is such a great economy, really doing so much well. Trading within East Africa, where Ugandans are spending about $5 million US in terms of tourism into Kenya, and Tanzanians are spending about $3 million US into Kenya in terms of tourism. That is an economy you cannot say that is doing badly. But yes, I can understand the situation and the mood where there are some, high levels of unemployment.
Right.
Of course, that comes with an increase of population growth, but also when you look at things as high fuel prices, and also this criticism of saying that President Ruto removed subsidies on essential things like posho, but we need to look at also the interventions that Ruto is trying to make, to fairly judge him and the achievements of the government by introducing things like seeds, giving farmers seeds so that they can farm, providing 200,000 acres to be able to put out a high output in terms of feeds and export and grow the export value. So the interventions that are being made, it's not that those interventions can be direct impact or can directly be felt or immediately be felt in the pockets of Kenyans, but these are long-term goals that eventually will produce yield alongside. So it's understandable for people to feel that way.
All right.
As anybody who does economics should look at it that way, that they're heading a good way.
All right, Darren, thank you so much for joining us. And happy Madaraka Day happy 60th Madaraka Day to our siblings in Kenya. We hope that the freedom that you celebrate will last for much longer. Thank you, Darren, and wish you a wonderful weekend.
You too.